I was still in my hospital gown when I sent the message. My hands were shaking a little, not from fear, just from the medication they had me on after the procedure. 3 stents. That's what the cardiologist told me that Tuesday morning. 3 blockages, 3 stents, and I was lucky I hadn't dropped dead on my kitchen floor 6 months earlier, when the chest pains first started, and I told myself it was probably just heartburn. I typed it out carefully because my reading glasses were in my coat pocket across the room, and I didn't feel like walking over there. "Hey, I'm being discharged this afternoon. Can someone come pick me up? Room 412. I sent it to the family group chat, the one my daughter-in-law had created 2 Christmases ago and named Family First. Cool snot, with a little house emoji. I put the phone down on the bedside tray and watched the ceiling for a while. The nurse had already gone over my discharge instructions. No heavy lifting, no driving for 2 weeks, follow up with Dr. Harrington in 10 days, take the blood thinners with food. I had a printed sheet folded next to my phone. Everything was in order. My phone buzzed. My son had responded, "Dad, I'm kind of in the middle of something. Can't you just get an Uber?" I read it twice. Then I read it a 3rd time, the way you do when you're trying to make sure the words mean what you think they mean. I typed back, "I just had a cardiac procedure. The discharge paperwork requires someone to sign for me." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Ask the hospital if they can make an exception. We're really busy today. Then, 30 seconds later, a second message, this one from my daughter-in-law. "Sorry, Walt, we've got a lot going on. Maybe call a neighbor?" Walt. She called me Walt. In 22 years of her being married to my son, she had never once called me by my first name. It was always Dad, or nothing at all. Something about seeing it written like that single word, Walt, like I was a co-worker she barely knew, hit me somewhere behind my sternum in a way that had nothing to do with the stents. I set the phone face down on the tray. I want to be honest about something. I am not a man who cries easily. I spent 31 years as a structural engineer, most of it on job sites in the wind and the cold, and I learned early that you keep your face neutral and your voice steady, and you solve the problem in front of you. That's just how I was built. But sitting in that hospital bed, 67 years old, with 3 pieces of metal mesh holding my arteries open and a discharge sheet I couldn't read without my glasses, I felt something cave in a little. Not completely. Just a small collapse, like a section of ceiling giving way in a room nobody uses. I called a cab. An actual cab company, not an app, because I'm old enough that I still have the number saved in my phone from back when that was how things worked. The dispatcher said 20 minutes. I got dressed slowly, button by button. I sat in the chair by the window, and I looked out at the parking lot, and I thought about the last 5 years. My wife Donna had passed in 2019. Pancreatic cancer, which is the kind that doesn't give you much warning and doesn't give you much time. We'd been married 41 years. After she died, the house felt like a building someone had evacuated. All the furniture still there, all the rooms still intact, but the thing that made it a home had left. My son and his wife had suggested I move in with them, into the in-law suite above the garage. It seemed like a reasonable solution at the time. Their kids were in middle school, I was still healthy, and I thought maybe being around family would help with the quiet. I signed over a portion of my savings to help with the addition they'd built onto the house the year before, $240,000. Not a loan, a gift. Because they were family, and because Donna would have wanted me to be generous. I moved in 14 months after her funeral. Within 6 months, I understood I had made a mistake. It wasn't dramatic at first. It was small things, the way my daughter-in-law would go quiet when I walked into a room, the way my son stopped asking about my old projects or my life before they were married, the way the grandkids, who I had doted on since they were born, suddenly seemed to have very full schedules whenever I suggested we spend time together. Then my son started asking about the house. My name was on the deed to a 4-bedroom colonial in Fairfield County, Connecticut, the house where my son had grown up, the house where Donna and I had raised him. When she died, I couldn't bring myself to sell it. I had it rented to a young family, a couple with 2 small children, good tenants who paid on time and kept the lawn clean. My son asked about the house 6 times in 18 months. Each time he framed it differently. Once it was estate planning. Once it was just thinking about the future. Once he mentioned that his brother-in-law was a real estate attorney and could handle the paperwork painlessly. Each time I said I wasn't ready to make any decisions yet. The 7th time he asked, his wife was in the room, and she said, quietly, like she was making a reasonable observation, "Walt, you're not getting any younger. It makes sense to simplify." I looked at her for a long moment. "I'll think about it," I said. I didn't think about it. Instead, 2 weeks later, I drove myself to the office of a woman named Patricia Sue, an estate attorney in Westport, who had been recommended to me by an old colleague. I sat across from her at a clean glass desk, and I told her everything. The money I had given, the house I still owned, the question of what happened if my health declined. She listened without interrupting. When I was done, she said, "Good that you came in now." We spent 3 sessions restructuring everything. The house was placed into a revocable living trust. The trust named a charitable remainder beneficiary, a scholarship fund of the community college where Donna had taken night classes in her 30s, back when she was trying to finish a degree she'd set aside to raise our son. My son was listed as a conditional heir, meaning he would inherit only if certain documented conditions were met in the 5 years following my death. If they were not met, the estate passed to the scholarship fund entirely. Patricia filed everything. I kept 1 copy in her office safe. I kept 1 copy in my own safe deposit box at the bank on Main Street. I did not tell my son. Then in February, I started having the chest pains again. And by March, I was in the hospital having those 3 stents placed. And on a Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting in a chair by the window in room 412, waiting for a cab. The driver was a man named George Osey. I remember because it was on the receipt. Quiet man, maybe 50, smooth jazz playing low on the radio. He saw me come out the front entrance, moving carefully, and he got out of the car and opened the door for me without being asked. I appreciated that more than I could say. On the drive home, he asked if I needed anything from a pharmacy. I said no. He nodded, kept driving. When we pulled up to my son's house, I sat there for a moment. There was a new car in the driveway, an SUV I hadn't seen before. The lights were on in the kitchen. I could see movement through the window. They were home. They had been home all afternoon. I paid George, thanked him, went upstairs to my apartment above the garage, and I sat in my armchair, and I didn't move for a long time. Around 7 o'clock there was a knock on my door. My son came in, and I could tell by the way he was standing, weight back, hands loose, that he had prepared something to say. "Hey, Dad, sorry about earlier. It was just a crazy day." I looked at him. He looked like me, my son, same jaw, same way of holding his shoulders. Sometimes it surprised me still. "It's fine," I said. "How are you feeling? Tired?" He nodded. He looked around the apartment the way people do when they want to seem interested, without actually being interested. Then he sat down on the edge of the couch, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "So listen," he said. "While you were in the hospital, Carla and I were talking. Carla, my daughter-in-law." "But what?" I said. "About the house. The Fairfield house." He paused. "House? Dad, the market is really strong right now, and with everything going on with your health, it just seems like the smart time to move on it. Simplify things. We could get you set up here more permanently, really make the suite into something comfortable." I was quiet. "The tenant's lease is up in August," he said. "I know when the lease is up," I said. "I'm the landlord." "Right, of course. I just meant it's good timing is all." "I'll think about it," I said. He left 20 minutes later. I heard him go down the stairs, heard the door to the main house open and close. I sat in the dark for a while. In the days that followed, things shifted. Carla started bringing me soup in the evenings, appearing at my door with a careful smile and a bowl of something, chicken noodle, vegetable beef. My son started stopping by after dinner, asking how I was feeling, sitting longer than he used to. My grandkids, who had barely looked at me for 2 years, suddenly appeared one Saturday asking if I wanted to play cards. It should have felt good. It felt like something I needed to keep track of. My chest was healing. I was walking more each day, making it to the end of the block and back, then around the block, then 2 blocks. The spring was mild that year, and the afternoons were good for walking. I called Patricia Sue on a Thursday, and we met at her office again. I told her what was happening. She listened and asked 2 or 3 careful questions, and then she said she wanted to show me something. She pulled out a blank form. "A quitclaim deed. If they ever ask you to sign something," she said, "bring it to me first, no matter how it's presented." I told her I understood. The ask came on a Sunday in April, 5 weeks after I got home from the hospital. My son and Carla sat me down in the main house living room after dinner. They had clearly talked about how to do it, because they were both calm, both speaking in measured tones, and they had a folder on the coffee table in front of them. Carla said, "We just want to make sure everything is taken care of properly." My son said the attorney drew up a simple transfer document, just to get the Fairfield property into both our names for tax purposes. It doesn't change anything about how you live here. He slid the folder toward me. I looked at it. I did not open it. "I'll need to have my attorney look at it first," I said. Something moved across my son's face. Not quite frustration. Something tighter than that, more contained. "Dad, it's straightforward. It's literally just a name change on a deed." "Then my attorney will confirm that quickly," I said, "and I'll sign it." There was a silence. Carla said pleasantly, "Of course, that makes sense." But she picked up her wine glass, and her eyes went to somewhere above my head and stayed there, and that small, careful pleasantness in her voice was the loneliest sound I had heard since Donna died. I took the folder. The next morning I drove to Westport and sat across from Patricia again. She read the document. It took her 4 minutes. Then she looked up at me. "This is not a simple name change," she said. "This would transfer full ownership of the property to your son and his wife, jointly, irrevocably, under this language." I nodded. "The value of that property right now," she said, "is approximately $830,000. I nodded again. "Walt," she said, "I want you to understand what you would be giving up." "I understand," I said. "Do you want to sign it?" "No," I said. "I want to know what happens now." She leaned back in her chair. "Now," she said, "we make sure everything that's yours stays yours, and we start documenting." I want to pause here and say something. My son is not a monster. I know that. I have been his father for 40 years. I held him in a hospital room not unlike the one I had just left. I watched him learn to ride a bike in the driveway of the Fairfield house. I drove him to college and carried boxes and didn't cry until I was back on the highway. He is not a monster. He is a man who got comfortable and then got greedy and then let his wife talk him further in the direction he was already leaning. That doesn't make it hurt less, but it helps me be accurate about what happened. I did not sign the document. I called my son that evening and told him my attorney had advised against it and that I was not going to transfer the property. There was a long silence. Then he said, "So that's it, after everything we've done for you." "I appreciate you having me here," I said. "Dad, we built an addition on this house. We rearranged our lives. I gave you $240,000 toward that addition," I said. "I paid you rent every month since I moved in." Another silence. "I think," I said, "we should talk in person." He came up that night. Carla came with him. I had not expected Carla. They sat on my couch. I sat in my armchair. I told them I had redone my estate planning. I told them the Fairfield house was in a trust. I told them the conditions of the conditional inheritance, that if, after my death, it could be documented that I had been treated with basic dignity and respect during my final years, the estate would pass to my son. If not, it would go to the scholarship fund. I had thought carefully about how to explain the scholarship fund. I told them it was in Donna's name, that it would fund continuing education for working adults in the county, people who were trying to finish something they'd had to put down. Carla looked at my son. My son looked at the floor. "So you set up a trap," he said. "I set up a plan," I said. "There's a difference." He left without saying anything else. Carla paused in the doorway, and for a moment I thought she might say something real, something from underneath all the careful management of the past months. But she just pulled the door shut behind her. That was 8 months ago. I still live in the suite above the garage. It is, if I'm being honest, a good apartment. I have my armchair, my books, a small deck where I can see the yard. In the mornings I make coffee and I read the paper and I walk 2 miles. My son and I are careful with each other now, the way you are when you've said true things and can't unsay them. We have dinner together on Sundays. He asks about my appointments. I ask about his work. We are not enemies. We're not what I hoped we would be. My daughter-in-law brings soup less frequently. I find I don't miss it. My grandkids have started coming by on their own some afternoons, just to sit, just to be around. My grandson asked me last month what I did when I was his age, and I told him about a summer I spent building a canoe with my own father in the garage of a house that's probably a parking lot now. He listened the whole time without looking at his phone. It was one of the best conversations I've had in years. 3 weeks ago, the young family in the Fairfield house sent me a card. A handmade one, construction paper and crayon from their daughter. "Thank you for letting us live here, Mr. Kaufman," it said, in uneven 7-year-old letters. "We love our house." I put it on the refrigerator. I have thought often about that Tuesday afternoon in room 412, about the cab ride with George, and the smooth jazz and the door he opened without being asked, about sitting in my armchair in the dark and understanding that the people I lived with had decided what I was worth and found the number to be very small. I don't say this to be bitter. I am 67 years old, and I have had a life that included Donna and a canoe and a son I raised with my own hands and 41 years of a marriage that was real. That is more than many people get. But I want to say this clearly, for anyone who might need to hear it. You are allowed to plan. You're allowed to protect what is yours. You're allowed to love someone and still look clearly at what they are doing. Those things are not contradictions. They are just what it looks like to be a grown man who has been paying attention. The stents are holding. Dr. Nen. Harrington says my numbers are good. I walk 2 miles every morning, and I drink my coffee, and I watch the yard come back to life after the winter, and I am still here, and I am still mine.